guys, welcome back to my Practically Imperfect Life. If you're joining me for the first time, welcome to my channel. My name's Abby and I'm a homeschooling mom. I have two high school students and I have two very different high school students, both in terms of their interests, how it is that they work, how it is that they best learn. And so because of that, I am not one of those moms who automatically assumes that the curriculum I use for my oldest is the same curriculum I'm going to use for my youngest. And over the years, I have found that in specific subject areas, especially, I need to make some different choices for the two of them. And literature and writing is definitely one of those areas where I've had to make some deviations between the two kids to best meet them where they're at, to work on the things that they are struggling with, and also to help build up their strengths. And so because of that, we do use two different literature programs for my students. My oldest uses Excellence in Literature and my youngest uses BJU Press. And we've done some alternating back and forth. Like last year, my daughter did do Apology as American Lit, and I can do a whole nother video on kind of why it is that we chose that for that particular year. But she did Excellence in Literature her freshman year, and we are going to be using it for her junior and senior years. My son has used BJU almost exclusively all through middle school during his freshman year, and then also going to be using it going to his sophomore year. Now, both of my kids get an honors English credit, and you might wonder like how it is that I determine that it's honors English given that they're using two different programs. So today I wanted to give you some comparisons between BJU's literature programs for high school and Excellence in Literature for high school. What is it that the two courses cover, how it is that they are different in terms of how they are formatted and what it is your student is doing, and what it is that I tweak or add in order to make each of those an honors course. So the first thing you should probably know is that BJU courses are typically designed to follow a particular grade level. Now that doesn't mean that you can't adjust the order of things or you can't choose to skip something one year and do something else a different year, but they do promote their curriculum kind of going by grade levels. So for their English, they have Fundamentals of Literature for 9th grade. They have Elements of Literature for 10th grade, American Literature in 11th grade, and British Literature for 12th grade. Excellence in Literature actually has 5 different programs. So you could choose to have your students start with Excellence in Literature programs in 8th grade and do all 5 programs going through their senior year, or you could choose to start with the first one or a different one in 9th grade and then omit one of those along the way. So they have Introduction to Literature, Literature and Composition, American Literature, British Literature, and then World Literature. So that's probably like the first big difference to note there is that the Excellence in Literature programs, while they're designed to be done in a particular order, they can be switched around. They aren't necessarily assigned to a particular grade. They more so focus on different topics or writing periods and areas in terms of how it is that they are organized. Excellence in Literature also offers a book called Handbook for Writers on their website. I'll throw a picture up here for you. We did purchase this for my daughter when we first introduced her to Excellence in Literature, and this has been a really valuable resource for her. So if you do choose to use this program, I highly recommend going ahead and purchasing this. It provides a ton of information on different things, from how to quote things and how to format things and how to create, works cited pages, and just overall guides to improving your writing. And it's just been a good reference book for her. And she's got sticky notes and tabs and highlights and things in there to help her quickly find things that she has found useful in the past when she's doing current writing assignments. So let's talk a little bit about how these curriculums are set up. So Excellence in Literature works in modules. So you have 9 modules. Each is designed to work over roughly 4 weeks. And again, keep in mind, this is homeschooling, so you can make adjustments as you need. This is just how it's presented to you. So you have 9 4-week modules, each one focusing on a different focus work with other context resources brought in. Whereas BJU divides things up into units. Now you can have anywhere from 6 units one year to 8 units another year. Obviously, if you're doing 8 units one year versus 6 another year, those units are going to be a little bit shorter. With the BJU units, each one focuses on a couple different literary terms or literary devices, something that it wants all of the works in that unit to kind of highlight and focus on. So for example, in the program that my son is going to be doing for next year, he's going to be doing elements of literature. His different units include, and I'm just going to read them off: imaginative comparison, sound and syntax, illusion and symbol, irony, folktale and epic, essay, short story, poetry, and then drama. So each of those units will teach him more about that literary device or that literary terminology, and each work that he reads will bring in that element, or there'll be questions that help him find that element within that part. And he's also done units that have focused on things like character, theme, setting. I mean, it kind of builds up year to year. I mean, I've definitely seen where the types of things he's needing to focus on in each unit has gotten progressively more difficult or more advanced as we've gone through the years of the BJU program. Now, as I mentioned, Excellence in Literature has the 9 modules. Each one has a focus text. That's the main thing that your student reads during the course of those 4 weeks and is writing about. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't also be doing additional research and reading on other things that are helping to build context of when the author lives and better understanding of the story. There's also an honors tract option, which I'll discuss more later, that introduces a second book in each module. But again, just to give some examples of what my daughter is going to be seeing for her British literature, she is going to be reading Beowulf for Module 1, then Canterbury Tales for Module 2, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, King Lear, Paradise Lost, Pride and Prejudice, Great Expectations, Wuthering Heights, and To the Lighthouse. So those are her focus texts for the 9 modules that she will be doing. So they're obviously not included in the book, right? So I do have to purchase each of those separately. That is probably one of the things that really strikes me as a difference between Excellence in Literature and BJU. Excellence in Literature does require reading full novels. I mean, it's almost exclusively reading full novels or full plays, whereas BJU units pull in a lot of different examples of types of works. So there might be poetry, short stories, essays. There can be brief biographies or autobiographies. There are excerpts from novels, like you might have a couple of chapters from a particular novel or excerpts from a play, or even a shortened version of a novel kind of condensed into a unit. And so rather than reading full books, he's reading a lot of different examples of different types of things within each unit. And again, when I discuss a little bit about how I make these courses both honors, I'll talk a bit about what I supplement with BJU to make it an honors course in my opinion, at least. Now, before I get into what specific assignments look like, let me just say that BJU courses are definitely more what I would call a traditional literature course. So you have reading assignments, you have questions you can fill out. There is a teacher resource guide that comes with a CD that gives you the option to print off vocabulary exercises, reading comprehension tests, like little short 5-question things to make sure that they've read the assignment. There are what they call teacher helpers, which are essentially worksheets that you can choose to do with the different stories. And we do utilize those a lot with my son. You also can get test and answer key packets. So for my son, we do the test for each unit, and then I have the answer key for it as well. And then here in the teacher guide, so I do buy the teacher guides for my sons. So I have a 2-part, a part A, part B, and then in the back is the CD where I can get all of the resources and print them off for him to use. Excellence in Literature is very different. There is no big teacher guide for me or anything like that. This is what I ordered. This is what I get. Now, there is a lot of good information in the back of these books for me as the teacher. There is a whole section in there on how to evaluate a student's writing, what it is that we're looking for, how it is to assign credit for it or to grade it, and then an example of how you can pull different things together to create a grade. But Excellence in Literature works more on, I would say, self-accountability with your student, because they aren't given on this day do this, on this day do that, on this day do this. Rather, they give a suggested 4-week schedule. Over the course of week 1, you should be completing these things. Week 2, you should be completing those things. Week 3 and week 4, etc. But how that is broken down and tackled is up to the student. And so it is very college preparatory in that way, in that when I give assignments from here to my daughter, I'm literally just telling her on Monday, this week you need to get these things done. And then it is up to her to figure out how much time she's going to put into this subject each day in order to accomplish that. And so she has to look ahead at her schedule and determine, what days is it that I have heavier assignments for other courses, or when do I have extra time that I can focus in on that. And I let her adjust her schedule. As long as the assignments are done by Friday each week, I'm totally cool with her arranging her schedule as needed. Now, BJU will give a much more detailed example of some lesson plans. And I use these as a guide. I don't follow them to the letter, but in the teacher guide, you do actually have a lesson plan overview where it breaks it down for you. I believe it was over 180 days. Let me just verify that I am saying that correct. Yeah, so they have it set up to where you could have lesson plans for 180 days. We don't follow this exactly. There are days that I condense down together. There are things that I take out, things that I might spend one day on instead of a suggested 3 days on them. And that allows me to add in some additional novel studies, which again, I'll talk about when we talk about making these honors courses. But it is really nice to have just a general guideline to go off of if you don't necessarily want to do lesson planning from scratch. You can certainly use this for a guide. It'll tell you what the topic is for the day, what pages they're reading, what the name of the story is they're reading, what are support materials. So that's from the CD. Am I doing particular teacher helper worksheets? Is there a quiz? Is there a word list? And then what is it that we're studying? Like, what's the topic? And then it even highlights where you can integrate Bible study or scripture references within each one, because BJU is definitely a course that is Bible-based or faith-based curriculum, whereas Excellence in Literature can kind of, I think, go either way depending on how it is you have your student focus on the studies. It isn't explicitly one or the other. It's really just focusing on, let's analyze this literature. At least that's kind of been our experience with it. So that probably gives you a little more of an idea on what the BJU assignments might look like, just kind of seeing that lesson plan. Again, there usually is an assignment of a certain number of pages of reading. There might be a worksheet that I choose to do from the teacher resources. I always do the comprehension quizzes. I always want to make sure that he's read it, understand it, hit those key points. And then we will incorporate in things such as thinking zones or after the reading questions. So in the textbook, after each reading assignment, there is a series of questions that are usually some general information from the story, but also some more interpretive things, or asking them to find things based on the focus of that module. So to give you an example of some of the questions, I'm just going to go to a random story in here. There is The Adventure of the Speckled Band. Okay, one of the stories from his book. And then about the story questions, we'll ask things like, identify the surprises that Holmes finds upon examining Julia's room. Did Holmes intend for the speckled band to attack Dr. Roylott? Respond to the story's ending. List at least 3 characters that help make mysteries like the speckled band enjoyable to read. So some basic questions, right, about the story. But I also like that throughout the BJU books, they also will have these pages that we call thinking zones. Now, I always do these with my son. It is a focus in on literary terms. So you might have a couple of key terms that are defined for your student, giving some more in-depth information about that. And then there's a list of questions where they have to basically kind of find those things within the stories that they read. So that is just something else that's included in here. Again, you could choose to have your student do those independently. Maybe that you want them to read that, you want them to do the questions, show you that they've done the questions. We like to do this part as kind of a discussion between me and my son. That way, one, I'm kind of doing a daily check-in with him and making sure that he's understanding things. And the teacher guide will give answers to all of these questions. It'll even highlight, like in the story, where that is. So if you need your student needs help finding an example of that within the literature, it's pointed out for you in the teacher guide so you can easily find it and help him out. Now, for Excellence in Literature, the weekly assignments are definitely a little bit different. So typically within a 4-week module, the first 2 weeks of that module, your student needs to read the focus text. Again, it's not telling them what pages to read each day. It's just start reading it this week. Make sure you finished it by the end of the next week. And then week 1 also will include context resources. So in the book for each unit, there is a introduction to the module, and then there is a list of all different kinds of context resources you can check. So module 4, for example, is King Lear here, and it lets us know that the module focus is elements of tragedy at work and considering the significance of the subplot to the unity of the play. So that's what it is that they're going to be learning about. But then there are pages of context resources that the student can look at over the course of the week. These will be links to websites that tell you more about the author, more about the time period, information about the works. There might be links to videos showing examples of like a documentary, or like with King Lear, like somebody actually performing it. There are audio files. There are links to poems that you can read that will help give more understanding to the time period or the author's life or the story itself. There are tons of context resources in here. And my daughter has never gone through all of them. She kind of picks and chooses which ones she wants to go in and explore. And a lot of times she'll pick and choose based on what she knows the assignments are going to be for the coming weeks. And so that's typically week 1, is starting the reading and doing some context research. So this teaches her to do both online and offline research kind of on her own. Again, I just check in with her. I don't assign specific ones. It's up to her to get on and make sure she's checking out these things. So she really has to kind of hold herself accountable to do that. And then the rest of the module period can be varied. There are usually several shorter writing assignments that are given over the course of the 4 weeks, and then one longer one that is due at the end of the 4 weeks. And the types of things can be things like author profiles, letters from characters, poetry analysis, literary analysis, what they call approach papers, or it could give a specific writing prompt and a set number of words that the essay needs to be in length. Now, in the back of the book here, there is a whole section that talks about what the different types of writing assignments are, and it gives an example of what they should look like. So the author has actually, with permission, taken examples of actual students' work and put them into the book. And so when you think about it, it's not writing multiple, 5-paragraph essays, right? It's not the same thing week after week. Each one looks a little different. So for example here, and I don't know how well it will show up, but I will try. Okay, here's a good example of an approach paper. So you read that and you might immediately think this is something that's going to be a 5-paragraph essay. Well, what an approach paper does is it has a summary paragraph, a couple sentences that tell the summary of the story. You have character descriptions. So you need to vividly describe 3 or 4 main characters in the story. So good descriptive words. You have to write 3 discussion or essay questions about the work. So really thinking about what you know about the story. And if you were the teacher, what is it that you would ask somebody about the work? Choosing a key passage from the story that you feel is the most important passage in the work. So she learned after she did a really long novel the first year that it would be a good idea to maybe highlight and sticky tab pages where she thinks she may have come across the main passage, because she read the whole novel and didn't do that the first time. And then she had to go back and try to find one. So it does help to mark as you read. And then a key passage explanation. So a full paragraph saying why you think that is the most important passage. So it's not a traditional paper. And then they do give an example of what it should look like when you have it all formatted. And it does that for all of the different types of papers that she might have to do. It also expects it to be done in MLA format. And so again, that's where the handbook for writers came in handy so much. It gave her guidance on how to actually format something in MLA format. We are also big fans of using the Purdue OWL website, and I'll try to remember to link that down below as well. It's really great for being able to cite resources and gives information on how to cite sources within a paper and how to correct format things and all of that. It's a wonderful resource and it's free. So you should totally utilize that. So that being said, you might go, my gosh, it sounds like this has a ton of writing assignments in it. And it does. I mean, there are no worksheets. There are no quizzes. There are no tests. You are grading this course based off the different types of writing assignments that your student is doing. Lots of great writing practice. So you really, in my opinion, wouldn't need to supplement this with other writing curriculum unless you wanted to. You certainly could, especially if there was something that you wanted your student to be kind of focusing on in terms of improving their writing, but you really wouldn't need to. This would encompass both literature and writing. Now, within the BJU, there are a couple of writing assignments kind of interspersed here and there throughout the lesson plan. And there's writing worksheets on the teacher CD you can print off, but there is not a lot of writing. There are essay questions on the tests, but there's not write a paper here, write a paper there. BJU does actually produce a writing and grammar subject kit, like a separate course for each of the grade levels. And I think their intention is for you to purchase those to do along with the literature. My son does IEW writing programs along with the BJU literature. And then again, when we talk honors track, I'll talk a bit more about the writing that we incorporate into that. But that is how the assignments kind of look on the excellence in literature. My daughter said the first year we did this, it took her a hot minute to get used to how things were supposed to be done. But once she understood what it was wanting in things like an approach paper or an author profile or in a literary analysis or a letter from a character, once she understood that, she was able to get through the assignments much more quickly. And so she did say she's kind of looking forward to going back to this year because she understands kind of the formatting of the papers now. It does really help that they give examples in the back of the book for her. So that is just something to kind of consider there. Now, I know the opinions on how a course should be listed on transcript can be varied, whether you should list it as, English 9, English 10, or Honors English 9, Honors English 10. Honestly, it is up to you as the parent to determine if you feel a course should be listed as an honors course or not, or if you need to weight it on a transcript. I have been doing the NCAA course paperwork, which I've talked about in previous videos, where I do have to kind of provide justification for courses and why they're named a certain way and what it is I included. And I am just of the opinion that I'm not just going to write honors in front of a course unless I really feel like it is a challenge to my student. To me, if it's an honors course, it should have an extra element of challenge to it. Now, Excellence in Literature does provide a lot of information on how they think you should adjust the course to make it honors level. The first part is that it asks for a second book to be read with each module, and it provides you with a couple of examples of books that you could look at as a second book. They typically are books that are from the same time period and kind of complement the focus text. And they do give, like I said, several different options because we have found that in some cases my daughter had already read some of those books, and so we kind of switched it up. And then it'll ask for a short paper to be done on that book, typically like the approach papers. So the ones that I kind of was telling you has the discussion questions and the summary and character description and things like that. Or there might be a short writing prompt about that second one. So it is a second book to read and a second or an added on writing assignment. And the way she used to kind of schedule it is she would work on the focus text the first 2 weeks and then those writing assignments. And then she'd read the bonus text weeks 3 and week 4 and then write at the end of week 4 the assignment for the honors course. And then it has a chapter where it assigns a research paper for the end of the year. And that is kind of the last piece that it wants them to do for it to be an honors course. So again, you can make your own determination on what you feel needs to be done to make it an honors course. For my son, I mentioned that we don't follow the lesson plans exactly as written. I cut out the writing assignments from the BJU lesson plans because we use IEW writing. I also will kind of condense things down. If there's a day where the only thing assigned is to read a few pages, I will condense that with another day, just have a slightly longer reading assignment and maybe some worksheets and things like that. And I do that in order to create time to do full novel studies. I am a firm believer in reading a book cover to cover, at least a couple a year, and doing some sort of deep dive into it, doing study guide questions, writing a paper on it, or doing a project related to it. I mean, I want him to have that practice. I really feel like that's important for him to have. Last year, we did 3 novel studies. So we would do 2 units in the BJU, then a novel study, then 2 more in a novel study, and 2 more in a novel study. And next year, we're planning to do something very similar. He's got 8 units to go through with BJU, but I do want to do at least 3 novel studies over the course of the year. So I will source those from things like Teacher Pay Teachers. I will find ones that I like and download those. He'll usually have study guide questions to do as he's reading, and then I'll either assign a paper or a presentation or a project, something like that, to kind of show his understanding there. And for me, that's the extra challenge for him, and that's what I use to term it as an honors course. But it is a very thorough course. So, I mean, you could decide to just follow the lesson plans that BJU provides and call it good. Now, why do I use 2 very different programs for my students? First part is attention spans. My daughter is much more able to focus for long periods of time on one thing. She can sit and read a long novel for several hours at a time and be fine. Like, it won't bug her. She'll stay focused. She'll be able to get through that. She's also really good at managing her own time. That's a skill that she just kind of naturally is good at, and she'll do that for a lot of her subjects, where she'll just kind of figure out how much time it is she needs to assign to things. And so since that's a strength of hers, I wanted to give her curriculum that, really drew upon that strength. She struggles with literary analysis essays, like really pulling out key points and being able to expand upon it. And that was just something that she needed to work on more. And so that's the challenge in the Excellence in Literature. There's, an assignment each module where that's exactly what she needs to do. So I wanted her to have more practice in doing that type of writing, because the more you practice it, the better you will get. So that curriculum really just pulls upon her strengths and helps her work on the areas where she's a little bit weaker. She also had told me that she really wanted to move away from things that looked like traditional curriculum. She was tired of doing worksheets, every day or every couple of days. She was tired of doing the same types of discussion questions. She wanted something that was a bit of a challenge for her. And that's when we found Excellence in Literature. Now, my other student, on the other hand, definitely has a much shorter attention span. It is a bit more of a challenge to, get him to sit and read for long stretches, or to really get into some of these longer classical novels. But he is good at pulling out these examples. Like when we're doing these discussion questions on, say, like a short story he read, he can find those literary devices. He can identify them. He's been improving a lot in terms of, identifying themes and types of characters and, the tone of a story and things like that. So it plays upon that strength of his. Like I said, he's got a slightly shorter attention span. I don't know, is this a hashtag teen boy thing, but just a shorter attention span when it comes to reading assignments. But we are still deep diving into what's included in those shorter assignments. He also thrives on routine. Like if things are pretty much the same day to day, that's perfect for him. And he knows when he sits down to do his literature, he's going to have a reading assignment. We're going to have questions we're going to discuss. He will probably have a worksheet. He knows at the end of the unit, we're going to do unit study guide, and then we're going to do a test. And that test is going to include true and false and matching and short answer and an essay, because that's how they all look all the time. So being able to just have that routine and know what to expect is good for him. And again, we do bring in the novel studies, at least 3 a year. And those are the things that I think just really challenge him. And I've tried to pick books that are a good mix of, classics that I feel like he needs to be exposed to and needs to read, but also things that will still, engage him interest-wise. Like he read The Hobbit last year, loved it. Like he loved it. And so he's doing The Fellowship of the Ring next year. And then he read The Golden Compass, and he also really loved that book. And we have the other 2 in that series on the bookshelf that he's just choosing to read on his own because he wants to complete the whole series. So it just gives me some flexibility there to be able to make those adjustments for him. All right, so that's a little bit about the differences between the Excellence in Literature program and the BJU program, and why it is that I made the decision to use 2 different curriculums for my students. I will link the websites down below that will show you where you can find the BJU curriculum and where you can find the Excellence in Literature curriculum. I will also put a link to the Purdue OWL, which I mentioned that we use if you want to utilize that for your students. That is super helpful when it comes to writing. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing down below to my channel so you can follow along with our homeschooling through high school journey. And as always, thanks so much for joining me today, everybody. Happy homeschooling.